David Smith here with another flipped classroom math video. A few tips before we start. Remember that you can speed up or slow down the playback if that helps you follow along. You can also pause the video at any point to catch up with your notes or to try the problems before I explain. Lastly, you can turn on the captions and follow along with my words on the bottom of your screen. Today's lesson is problem solving with the sine and cosine rules. So these can be tricky word problems, but just be confident that your knowledge of these two rules will lead you to the answer. So let's do one. Okay, so here's the words with this problem. A zip line, zip lines are where you attach yourself to it and you go whee, go really far and fast and things like that, high over the ground. So we've got a zip line and it's going to be attached to the ground and the top of a sloping cliff. So let's take a look at our diagram. Here we go. Here's my sloping cliff, right? Here's the cliff top, got a little tree up there, and the zip line is going to be attached from the top of the cliff to the ground. And you can see we have some measurements here, and this is why this is a problem. We can't actually measure the cable, but we can measure this distance, this angle, and that angle. And that's all you're going to need to solve this problem. So let's take a look at the problem again. A zip line attached to the ground on the top of a sloping cliff. Here's the question. What is the length of the cable needed? So back to the diagram. We need to figure out how long this cable is going to be. So pause the video for a minute and think about this problem and decide whether you need to use the sine rule or the cosine rule. Okay, if you decided sine rule, you're right. We do need to use the sine rule. Now, there's another piece of information that you need that you don't yet have. So pause the video and see if you can figure that out. Okay, so if you realized to use the sine rule to find this length, it's going to be this length over the sine of this angle, could be this length over the sine of that angle, and we don't have that angle. So pause the video, see if you can figure out what that angle is. Okay, if you realized that in this triangle we have 180 degrees, so that angle is going to be 180 minus 40 and minus 116. And that ends up being 24 degrees. So I'm going to put that on my figure. In fact, you want to always label your diagrams. I strongly encourage that when you do a word problem like this for your homework, you want to draw the picture in your notes and then you can mark it up. So I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to mark this as equaling x because that's what we're going to find. Okay, so now pause the video again and see if you can write a sine rule equation that will have x, this angle, and 127 and that angle. So go ahead and do that. Okay, let's see how you did. Now the way the sine rule works is it's the length of a side over the sine of the opposite angle. So I'm going to do the one with our x first. X over sine 116 is going to equal 127 over sine 24. So as long as we did this step correctly, now we're ready to just plug and chug. So I'm going to cross multiply and simplify, and what that's going to give me is x is going to equal 127 times sine 116 all over the sine of 24. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do that calculation. Okay, so here's the answer for that, 280.6 feet. Now, you always want to do a reasonableness check, just to make sure your answer fits the diagram. Okay, so let's take a look. If this is 127 feet, does it make sense that that's 280? Yeah, it does. This is a little bit more than twice this, and if I look at the diagram, that seems very reasonable. So I'm confident that I have the right answer. Okay, let's do a second problem. All right, so now we have a different situation. Here's the words for that. You're going to build a bridge over a little canyon, okay? And but you can't measure the distance. For some reason, you can't measure the distance across, probably because there's a big canyon in the way. You can't just walk across and measure it. So you can't measure it directly. Using the measurements in the diagram, find the length of the bridge. So let's take a look at the diagram. Here you go. Here's your canyon. This is a much lower section, maybe with a little stream flowing down the middle, that kind of thing. And this would be your cliff edge. And here's your bridge. Okay, so that's what we want to find. I'm going to go ahead and mark that equals x, because that's our unknown. Now check it out. You did make these measurements. You measured from one corner of where the bridge is supposed to be, one end, and you went 511 feet to this point, and then you went 452 feet back to the other end. Now this is nice because you can measure that angle between these two lines that you staked out on the ground. So now the question is, first question, which rule do you use? Can you use the sine rule or the cosine rule to solve this problem? Pause the video and think about that. Okay, if you came up with cosine rule, you're right. And here's why. We want to find, so first off, you see we've got a triangle here. We know these two sides and the angle in between them. And guess what? We want to know the side opposite of that angle. So that's a primary thing for the cosine rule, because it always relates the sine or cosine of an angle to the side opposite of that angle. So that's the cosine rule for that one. Now pause the video and see if you can write a cosine rule equation for this problem. Okay, let's see how you did. So the way that works is your variable, your unknown, is always across from the angle, so that's going to be your x squared. We don't know that, so that's x squared. Now we just plug in the two sides, so this is 452 squared plus 511 squared from this side, and then we do the minus 2bc cosine A, so that's going to be minus 2 times one side times the other side times the cosine of the angle, which is 18, so we do cosine 18. So now we have a nice big plug and chug problem. And I recommend you write down several steps along the way. So if you make a mistake on a test or a quiz, if I can see where you went wrong, I may be able to give you more partial credit. If you write this step down and then write the answer next and it's wrong, you're going to lose more points. So let's do that. I'm going to write x squared, 1 minute. I got it already calculated for you. It's going to be, I added these, I squared them and added them together, and I get this ginormous number, 565, 425. Big number, but we can work with that. That's a 4. And then this whole thing ends up being 443,601.9. So that's a nice intermediate step. Now I'm going to subtract this big number from that big number, and I get x squared is going to be 21,823.1. And then finally, to get x alone, right now it's squared, I need to take the square root of both sides, and I'm going to get x equals 147.7 feet. Okay, so that's the plug and chug for once I've got my, my values put into my cosine rule equation. Now let's do the reasonableness test. We got 147.7 feet for our bridge. Does that make sense? I think it does. These are 511, 452. This is going to be quite a bit shorter. You can just see on the diagram. And 147, that does make sense. So I feel confident that I got my right answer. Now that you've finished, take a moment to write down any questions so you can bring them to our next class and get some help. You can also watch the video again to improve your understanding. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button down below, and if you'd like to help me grow my YouTube channel, please click subscribe.